Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Usually, when I have guests, I give a whole introduction about them in the intro piece when they're still not present, but those are usually people I worked with previously. And with you, it's a little bit of a different situation because I actually didn't know you. You were one of those cold outreach people to a crush company that I had. So I discovered weightlifting after I had my first baby completely accidentally. And my husband actually told me there's this app. Why are you spending so much money on a trainer? You could use it. And in the beginning, I used it in between sessions. So I did, 1 to 2 sessions a week. And then in between, I would have workouts. What I loved about the app was that I didn't have to think, okay, what do I need to do next? I didn't have to always resort to the same, squats and push-ups, but it really built out a thing for me. And the app developed, I think, over time. I'll just say a few of my favorite features and then I'll give the floor over to you. But one of the features that was broken for the longest time and then started working and it totally changed things was the share your workout at the end of the workout. And it's like, it's not crucial because you can still have a good workout without sharing it. But being able to share it with a few people who care really makes a difference. It makes you push harder. Like, yeah, I can take on a bit of extra weight. Yeah, I could do a few more reps. And then the other feature is the progress goals. So I feel like a lot of product managers are data junkies and getting the, okay, your weekly goal is X and your X amount to goal, and then getting the personalized reports where you could literally go in and see how your muscle mass has changed and the amount you're able to lift changes. So those are just amazing features that keep me wanting to come back in addition to just being able to do the workouts. So giving the floor over to you, Josh, how did you end up at Fitbod? You have illustrious companies in your career, including Lyft. Tell us about it.
Cool. Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, and awesome to hear that. Those are kind of all the goals we have here. So amazing to hear that someone on the other side, and then especially hearing from another product person, you can probably kind of guess some of the thought process behind it. So excited to dig into that. But yeah, a little bit on me. Like you mentioned, I've spent most of my career in consumer tech, but actually at bigger companies. So before this, I was at Lyft launching kind of 0 to 1 products, trying to grow new businesses. Before that, I was at Zillow leading the personalization efforts all around kind of using ML to help users find the right home. So Fitbod was it was a perfect culmination of my career experiences in ML and growing new businesses, but also with my passion, right? So I think what less people know is I've been super into lifting for ever since high school. And my story is actually when I started lifting, I couldn't even do one push up. And then I took it to the extent of I did a bodybuilding competition a few years out of college and actually placed and like I can't reach it, but I have a sword on the side of my room, which is kind of the award you win in bodybuilding competitions. Pretty funny. But yeah, that's kind of my journey. So I've always been passionate about fitness. I even tried kind of personal training for a bit. But what kind of stopped me is I knew I wanted to influence that space by kind of giving more people this tool that I found, right, which is strength training, but do it at scale, right? And Fitbod was the opportunity to kind of take what I've learned in tech and apply it to the space I'm excited about. So when I met the founders, I was like, okay, I need to jump on this opportunity.
So we're not only speaking with an excellent product manager, we're also speaking with a weightlifting champion.
I wouldn't take it that far, but aspiring.
Let's touch on the product aspects of Fitbod. So I've tried a number of apps. There's one that Arnold Schwarzenegger endorsed, and I tried a couple. I keep on coming back to Fitbod. Habit building is more difficult for fitness than it is, let's say, for a gaming app where you could just tap into an addiction and cultivate that. Habit building around something complicated, I think Peloton has done a good job with it. You're working on that. Can we talk on like what are the key pillars to keep people coming back and continuing to work towards a goal and developing a skill?
Cool. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like you mentioned, habit formation is so key across consumer apps, right? Attention is so limited. But then if you apply that to fitness, even more, right? Everyone knows all the people that kind of have New Year's resolutions and fall off. Like our category is notorious for that. So yeah, that's been at the center of how Fitbod was designed. One thing that it's kind of easy to miss, but has been there since the start is if you open Fitbod compared to a lot of these other apps, you'll notice Fitbod drops you straight into your next workout, right?
Start
Where
workout. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Where a lot of other apps, and maybe the more intuitive way is like you would expect you need the overarching program or your calendar or like a feed of all your recent activity or something like that, right? But that was actually a really intentional choice. And the reason is logging that workout is the core habit loop, right? And our founders were actually super influenced by the hooked model. I'm sure you've heard of it from Nir Eyal's
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
I hope I said his name right.
I think so.
But basically, I'm sure all the listeners know too. But the way the model goes is kind of the best habit formation products are these loops, right? And in the loop, there's a trigger, which is kind of some desire you have, right? There's action, which is usually opening the app. There's the reward, which is what the product gives back to you. And there's investment, right? So every time you go through the loop, you should become more invested. And in our case, we design the product around that, right? So the kind of trigger is uncertainty around wanting to work, knowing what to do in the gym, right? Or a desire to work out. The action is opening the app. The reward is actually interesting. We have it on multiple levels. So the
Okay.
first reward is it's like a pretty variable reward piece around what is today's workout going to be, right? It's always a bit different. So that's one piece. So we got the variability there. And then we also got, oh, nice, you don't have that uncertainty that you had that we kind of solve. But then what I think makes our loop really powerful is there's more reward after the fact, right? So once you log the workout, you see your PRs, your results, maybe a badge you earned. You feel the satisfaction of having worked out, right? You maybe see
The
results.
records.
Yeah, the records, exactly. Yeah, PR.
Oh,
Sorry,
that is what the records are.
industry term. But yeah, so that's like the second reward hits you, and I think that keeps people really hooked. And then finally, investment, right? And this is where that kind of personalization ML stuff comes in, right? Every set you log, every edit you make, you've just made the workouts better, and you've made the product better for you, which makes you more likely to come back, right? So that's kind of the basics of the habit formation that have been there from the start.
So it's interesting what you didn't bring up when you're talking about reward and goals. You didn't bring up any of the long-term things, like people might wanna put on muscle
Mhm.
or lose weight. And I've noticed that also throughout working out. Talk to me about that. Why isn't that part of the overarching plan, loop, etcetera?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So actually, I would say that's the thing we think about the most as a company, but it's like not necessarily what we think of as the kind of short-term habit formation, right? So if you zoom out a bit, what we think about the most is retention, right? And what does retention mean? That just means you have a great product that is solving a real need. And the ways we move retention, and we're actually organized this way. So we have one of my squads is focused on near-term habit formation, which is kind of this loop and a lot of this artificial reward that we can provide you, right? Like your streaks, your milestones, whatever. And this stuff does have a lot of impact on the metrics, and you need to nail this at the start or people just fall out of your funnel. But long-term retention and building our actual business comes from fulfilling that promise that we're going to deliver results, right? In terms of strength or in terms of kind of transforming your body composition. And we know that's what really keeps users coming back in the long term, right? There's a ton of users that have been on the app for 5+ years. And these users are not here because of some streak, right? They're here because Fitbod was a part of helping them change their life in some way, right? Like way stronger, way more confident, look better, whatever. So actually, I would say like more than half of our team is dedicated specifically towards making sure you have those outcomes. And actually, one kind of fun story this year, for the first time, we've actually been able to run A/B tests where the success metric is how fast people are getting stronger. And we've actually measurably moved that metric with multiple experiments this year, which is really cool as like a data person, also as like a fitness person.
Are you able to give an example?
Yeah, so one example is actually really simple. So I'm sure like you've heard of the concept of progressive overload, right? You have to do things that are slightly harder over time in order to make your body adapt. And one thing that we've always been very conscious of is we don't want to push users too hard and make them overtrain, right? And we still think about that a lot. But we ran one experiment where we basically just added a very like small fraction to how quickly we progress users' weight, right? Basically pushing them a little bit harder. And we did it for a small percent of users. We want to be very cautious. But what we saw is actually a lot higher conversion, a lot higher retention. And then most importantly, people were gaining strength a lot more quickly just with us pushing them harder. And actually, when we looked at the data, we were like, okay, that makes sense, but there's probably some users we push too hard. What we saw was actually, we tracked this metric called displacement, which is how much you edit your weight.
Mm.
We would
Oh,
have
okay, okay,
expected,
okay. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, we would have expected more users to edit down. That didn't actually happen, right? And it kind of aligns with what a lot of people in kind of science-based fitness community know, but people don't push themselves hard enough, and people think that they're pushing themselves harder than they actually are. So in this case, just telling them to do more actually made them do more, have better results, drive all the outcomes we want as a business. So kind of interesting one.
And what's your way of tracking if someone has better results?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things, but I'd say one of the biggest is this metric we've developed called M strength or muscle strength. And you mentioned the weekly reports, so I'm sure you've seen those strength graphs, and that's basically what this metric is. And it's actually really cool, and it's actually something that we can only do because of the sheer amount of data that we have, right? But if you think about the app, right, there's hundreds of different exercises, maybe thousands that you can log. There's no way we're going to be able to measure all of those in an A/B test, right? So what this metric actually allowed us to do is our data science team was able to figure out exactly how strong your muscle is based on the variety of exercises you've done, right? So let's say like your chest muscle strength is influenced obviously by like chest press, bench press, things like that, but it's also influenced by shoulder press and other things that like use your chest as a secondary muscle. So this is like a metric we're able to assign to each muscle that basically calculates your strength, right? So we basically test on that metric. How much are users increasing that metric on average per week, or their overall muscle strength?
Fascinating. Let's go through a few features, and then I'm also going to push you as a for things I wish you had, and tell me where you're at with those. Okay, so
Yeah,
things
yeah.
I love the ability to swap out an exercise. So the biggest example I think a machine has taken. There's a time crunch. I'll either move it around in the exercise set, and I'll get to it later when
Mm-hmm.
that person leaves, or like, is there anything replaced with, and it will show me other exercises that work on the same muscle group.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that gives a good amount of agency, but also feeling like, okay, but the experts told me this is okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to share anything behind that? Or like, is that
The
commonly
thinking behind
used?
that.
Or?
Yeah, kind of the thinking behind that feature, or like how we see people use it, or
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I mean that's like one of the most often used features. On average, people do that multiple times during a workout. And yeah, the I actually like this feature's been around since the start, so I don't actually know the initial rationale, but the way I think about it is we can do a lot to give you like a great workout for today, but there's some things that we can't predict, right? One of the big things is this equipment availability, right? Or even like proximity of two pieces of machinery together if you want to do superset or things
So
like that,
true. Yeah.
right? And then there's also like I'd say that's a big one, but then like some people just prefer certain exercises, right? And we can learn all of that from the data, but um, we don't want you to have to wait for us to learn, right? So I think giving users that agency is super important, and it is kind of one of our advantages, right? If you look at what people are doing instead of Fitbod, a lot of people are just doing kind of whatever random workout comes to mind, right? But a lot of people are following much more rigid programs. So I think what we can do is we can give you a starting point and you can edit it, and we can help you modify while staying on the right path, right? So it's kind of a balance of giving you agency but also helping you do the right thing. So
R-
I think about
right. It's like there's this psychological concept about too much choice and people getting overwhelmed. So it's just the right amount of personalization where it's like you have the guide, you can change a thing if you need to, but the direction is there.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So the other one is how to. And I have like a customer request here also. The how-to videos are so good. The only times when there are issues is sometimes a how-to exercise won't have weights, and the exercise instructions do have weights, and like you're like, how do I even do weights on this? Like if you're doing I don't know the proper term. Like when you lift your hips with the leg up and
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
just put some weight up, or leg raises with 20 pounds. It's like where the weight's gonna go. And the videos don't have it. But for most exercises, it's so good. Just like, okay, I have the video, two videos from the side and from the front, and then also the explanation by word is sometimes even better than a person who will walk you through how to do it and posture.
Nice. Yeah, glad to hear that feature's been helpful. Yeah, I mean, I would say in that case, it's kind of a struggle that I would think everyone in our category has. Basically, we have hundreds of exercises, but there's always more exercises that we want to do, right? That different people want to do. So if you think about hip thrust, is that exercise? People do hip thrust body weight. They do it with barbells. They do it with like putting a plate in their lap. And these are all like different variants that would have like different data you'd want tracked and things like that. So like I think the solution in today's world would be we have a process where users can request exercises, and then we'll eventually add it, and then we'll eventually get someone to film it and add it to the app and things like that. So this is kind of in that category of things where there's just like an endless long tail of exercises. So, and one thing we've thought about is how do we automate this, right? Like, do we allow users to create custom exercises? It's like a feature that we're strongly considering, and then use that as like an automated way to create new exercises, right? So maybe that's one solution. But yeah, that's probably one of the top requested things is some exercise that we're missing.
Okay, customer request on this one. So you have this person who's doing it on the video, and you're doing it and you're like, I am absolutely awesome. And then sometimes, a friend will be passing by, they'll video you or you'll video yourself, and you're like, I'm actually horrible. Like, I'm not going deep enough.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not flexing enough. Like, I'm not going all the way. Is there anything in the pipeline or any feedback you get about where people are like, what is the quality of me following your instructions? Am I doing a good
Mm.
job?
Yeah, that's a super interesting idea, and we've considered things like that before, kind of around form correction and kind of personalized tips. So I don't think we're there quite yet. So like nothing like specifically on the roadmap, but we have done actually in our last hackathon, we had a project where we were able to kind of take a video. You could even in real time have a camera in front of you, and we could identify what exercise you're doing. We could count reps. We had another one where we kind of took the image, gave it to a model, compared it to our image from our instructions, and we're able to find the differences. So like I think with where AI is and how it's progressing, it's becoming a lot more possible, and we're getting like good data back from these things. Sometimes I think just getting to where it works at scale is kind of the challenge, and I think something we'll keep considering, but not on the roadmap yet.
That is so exciting. Okay, so when I'll be squatting, it'll be like, okay, keep going.
Maybe yeah, go deeper, or like velocity tracking is interesting too, right? You can the like the exercise science basically says you can calculate how far someone is from failure, tracking how fast
Mm.
the rep is, right? So we tell you to do a max effort set, and we can actually tell you how close you are to max effort. So a lot of exciting stuff there that I think the new advantages or the new advances in technology will enable, but yeah, not exactly there yet.
Okay, I feel like the way you're talking, the vibe I'm getting is very much AI technology. My understanding is Fitbod as a goal replaces a human trainer. Would you
Mhm.
say that's accurate, or is there also interest in reshaping or enhancing the coach trainee relationship?
That's a super interesting question. One thing, like with, I wouldn't say our goal is replacing training. I kind of see like us and personal trainers kind of on the same side of the battle, right? We all really believe in this tool, which is resistance training, that we think is under leveraged and can solve a lot of the top health problems that people have. So I think we're all trying to do the same thing and we're all on the same team. But I'd say there are like some differences, and the biggest is cost, right? Like trainers are kind of cost prohibitive. And whenever I think about like the choice between a trainer and us, and yeah, exactly, we think we're a really good alternative to trainers for 99% of people. The way I think about it is kind of thinking about what does a trainer do and then comparing that to what we can do, right? So if you think about trainers and kind of looking at the research, number one thing is they tell you what to do in the gym to make sure you have results, right? And avoid all the guesswork. Number two is what you were just saying, right? They help you correct your form, make sure you're not going to make mistakes that are going to hurt yourself, help you work around an injury, things like that. And then number three, and I think like underrated one, but probably the biggest one is they motivate you, right? If someone's at the gym waiting for you and pushing you, you're going to push a lot harder. So I'd say number one with our data, our models, like we can do as good as most personal trainers for most use cases, and in the future probably even better, right, with the sheer scale of data. With two, I would say, like you mentioned, like I think we're a really good solution for the majority of cases, but if you have like a specific mobility issue or an injury and you can afford it, you're probably better off going to a trainer for a little bit and then maybe you can come to us after. Or if you can afford the trainer, you can keep doing that. And then motivation is kind of a lot of what we talked about earlier, is like us trying to crack that. But I think a person in person with you is going to push most people harder for the time being, right? And maybe we can close that gap over time, but I would think that's probably one of the biggest things that an app is going to struggle to replace if someone really benefits from that.
Wow. Okay, we're running low on time, but I feel like there's so much I want to get to. Let's do one more question, and then we'll go into lightning round.
Cool.
Very for me, it worked as a customer, but really cool pricing strategy, right? I think it's the first 3 workouts for free, and then you could subscribe, paid, and then there's also an option to share. Tell me about, like, how much testing has gone around that, how effective that model is, a free trial, because it's, like, the constant topic of how do you get someone to subscribe, how much do you give
Yeah.
away for free without ruining your business?
Yeah, for sure. So it's something that we're constantly optimizing and testing. We have a PM that's dedicated to activation and has been for a while. So that's something we're always focused on tweaking. One thing that's like pretty interesting is actually Fitbod started out freemium. So we had a free tier and a paid tier. This was years ago. But basically, what we found was the free tier and the paid tier were both not that good on their own, right? Because when you do freemium, or at least how we did it originally, you kind of split out the value, right? And you give like an okay free experience and an okay paid experience. And, or I guess the paid experience is great, but it's not that much better than the free experience. So you end up with like a lot of people getting on the app for free, churning because it's not that great, or people upgrade, downgrade because the difference isn't that clear. So one thing that actually really propelled Fitbod's growth was going this kind of paid only plus trial route. I think that's a kind of surprise. That was surprising when I learned it. I think it's kind of interesting. On trial length, I would say like 3 workouts has worked great, but maybe that's something we'll test out of. So we've tested a 7-day trial instead, right? And that's performed better with some cohorts. You could also think about like when you ask for the credit card, right? We've also considered maybe eventually we go back to freemium to get a ton of new users and acquire them more organically, right? So something we're always thinking about. But yeah, I thought that story from the switch from free to paid was pretty interesting when I heard it.
Surprising?
Yeah.
When you think about what keeps you up at night in terms of, like, if we could crack this, if we could figure this out, we're gonna be in a different playing field. What's that one big problem you wanna solve?
Wow, yeah, that's a really good question. have more organic growth, whether it's through like virality tactics like sharing and referrals, or whether it's through like publishing our research online, or there's so many directions you can go, right? So I think that's one of the pieces, because we have this great product that works for so many use cases, but a lot of people just don't know about us yet. So I think that's one. And then the other one is just retention, like we talked about at the beginning, right? Our retention's already great for our category, but that's the hardest metric. That's the most important metric, right? Like, how do we make sure that even more users love our product and stick around? And that one is my main job. So that's what I'm thinking about constantly.
Okay, I'll throw out an idea for you. Take it or leave it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
for virality, go through personal trainers, because like I've had 3 different times in my life where a trainer literally on a pen and paper wrote out exercises for me. And it's so
Okay.
hard to follow and it's long for them to write down, and then you only have one workout. If they could just go into Fitbod and say patient SD, or not patient,
Hmm.
whatever we're called, um, spend too much time in healthcare, and just assign the exercises, and then they start me off. And number one, that what's a person who works out? A member? A client?
uh, a lifter, we call them weekly active lifters, is our retention metric.
So that weekly active lifter, if they're coming through a coach, they already have a higher dispensable income. They already have a level of commitment. And then one coach has multiple lifters. So there's kind of the
That's
virality thing there, if it's a tool for them to use.
cool. Yeah, I really like that idea. And like, actually, we have several personal trainers in our community, like on the app, that have actually asked for that too. So
Woohoo!
that a couple times. Yeah.
Okay. We spoke about it a little bit at the beginning, and you told me you spend a lot of time thinking about it, and glad it works as it is. But talk to me about the sharing factor. That, 'cause that feature
Cool.
was down for a while, and then I feel like it really there's so many different ways to share, and on
Yeah.
Instagram and via text and other stuff. Talk to me about the design, the thinking behind it.
Yeah, for sure. So that one, like most of our features, kind of comes back to that core loop, right, of logging workouts. And when you think about it, there's certain moments in that loop that generate moments that you actually want to share, right? Like accomplishing some result, or staying consistent for some amount of time, or like your year in review and things like that, right? So basically, we wanted to just take those moments where users want to share anyway and make it easier for them, make it better, right? So they can celebrate their moments and things like that. I'd say like some of the interesting things from that feature, actually where it originated was users were screenshotting parts of the
Mm.
experience a bunch so we could tell. So a lot of the new features we build, if we don't build sharing from the start, we'll always instrument screenshots, so we can tell like if people are screenshotting something a bunch, then okay, it's probably something we should implement sharing for. So I'd say that's one piece of it. The other thing that's pretty interesting is people share for different reasons, right? And we've done a lot of research on that. Some people share for motivation. Some people share just to kind of show off. Some people
Okay.
share for accountability. Some people share for competition, and they have group chats where they share their workouts every day. So that's another thing that's been kind of interesting to see and think about, which are the behaviors we really want to lean into to supporting, right? And I think accountability and motivation is one of them that's high on the list, right? How do we use this feature to help our current users stay more engaged, but also bring more friends onto the platform, which helps us, helps them, right?
If you could meet one person, dead or alive, who would that be?
Man, it's a hard question. I don't know. Let's go with Arnold because we're on the weightlifting topic.
What would you wanna ask Arnold Schwarzenegger?
I would ask him to be our brand ambassador, because that would blow us up immediately. No, I feel like I would just ask him to like do a workout with him. I feel like that'd be so cool. Just hearing his stories, like getting lifted together.
Is he on steroids? For sure, no?
For sure, he's on steroids, but I don't know if that's official. I don't
Okay,
know about now, but I
okay,
think any competitive bodybuilder that's had success probably took steroids at some point.
okay. Your favorite place to travel? Either a place you've been to or a place that you really want to go to?
I think I'd have to say Japan. I've actually been to Japan twice. I've been dying to go again. I think just it's really cool combination of like a lot of history and that type of thing, but combined with like a futuristic city, and then just love sushi and ramen and things like that. So always love Japan.
What's the weightlifting culture like in Japan?
I actually don't know about that. I feel like people are like a lot like smaller on average. I know like when I shopped there, I had to size up like two sizes, so maybe it's not as big. But I feel like I see, especially in like probably Japan, but I feel like out of like Korea and like India and like a lot of the Asian countries, I feel like are getting more into bodybuilding. I feel like I see it on Instagram and things like that.
Do you think bodybuilding is a fad, like the yoga days, the Pilates days, the cycling days, and now bodybuilding, or do you think it's more here to stay?
I would say like maybe bodybuilding and people just trying to get as huge as possible is like, I don't know if I'd call it a fad, but I think it'll always be like a niche thing, where I think resistance training is something that's going to continue to grow, right? Like I think like something we believe at Fitbod, I believe part of why I joined the company is I think resistance training is 100% the most under leveraged thing that people can do to improve both their health now, but also kind of health span longevity. And it feels like people are only starting to realize that the last couple of years, and you're hearing more and more people say that. So I think it's only going to grow. Like right now, running's kind of the default thing to get in shape, right? I think eventually it's probably going to be lifting.
After you break all your bones running, you can start.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least do both.
On that note, what's the one message you want to leave anyone listening to this episode?
Go weight train. No, I really think, yeah, I feel like it's a cool kind of metaphor for any other part of life too, right? Just you can see hard work gives you visible results. So I'd say like if you don't do it yet, worth giving it a try. I think anyone can benefit from strength training.
Josh, this has been such a fun conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.